global news, right? So you have the US Federal Reserve, which has cut rates by 25 basis points. And, we're going to talk about that a little bit more. The US Federal Reserve continues the tightening path to bring back inflation to 2%. Jerome Powell led the Federal Reserve, and he's raised interest rates by 25 basis points. The chairman, in his speech, signaled a possible pause on the rate hike in June, taking up a data-dependent approach from here on. Meanwhile, he also added that it was still a long way to go in the battle against inflation. He says, if at all, the US is likely to see a mild recession, but conditions are pointing towards avoiding one at the moment. Let's listen in straight from Jerome Powell himself.
In terms of what we're doing, of course, I think banks themselves or many banks are now are attending to liquidity and taking opportunity now, really since the events of early March, to build liquidity. You asked about the separation principle. Like so many things, it's very useful, but ultimately it has its limits. I mean, I think in this particular case, we have found that the monetary policy tools and the financial stability tools are not in conflict. They're working well together. We've used our financial stability tools to support banks through our lending facilities. I would just say, in terms of J.P. Morgan buying First Republic, the FDIC really runs the process of closing and selling a closed bank completely. That is their role, so I really don't have a comment on that process. This is an exception for a failing bank, and I think it's actually a good outcome for the banking system. A broad understanding of monetary policy, credit tightening is a different thing. There's a lot of literature on that, but translating it into rate hikes is uncertain. The case of avoiding a recession is, in my view, more likely than that of having a recession.
Right. So a slower economy rather than a recession is what Jerome Powell is really penciling in. Now, latest on the banking crisis, sources suggest that Pacwest Bancorp is weighing in strategic options, which include a possible sale amid flaring concerns around its financial health. The news flow marring investor sentiment as Street continues to factor in contagion fears from the SVB and First Republic collapses. Reacting to the news flow, Pacwest took a hit of 53% in after-hours trade.
Well, and plane maker Airbus posted a smaller than expected fall in the Q1 earnings. Strong performance largely aided by their helicopter segment. Company chief Guillaume Faury held US engine maker Pratt & Whitney for some of its troubles. The supplier is having to juggle between providing enough engines for new jet production while feeding enough spares to airlines to meet with the larger than expected engine wear out.
An Indian origin, Ajay Banga, to now head the 25-member board of World Bank. With the appointment, he is tasked with revitalizing the organization to confront challenges primarily on the climate change front.
And we'll point the camera to Russia-Ukraine for a bit. Big escalation in the Russia-Ukraine war. Kremlin says it was attacked by 2 drones last night. But President Putin of Russia is safe. Kyiv accused of trying to assassinate the Russian president. But Ukraine denies any such attempt. Russia now says it reserves the right to take retaliatory measures wherever and whenever is deemed necessary. Let's go across to Maruf Raza, consultant and strategic affairs expert on this particular piece.
Yes, Russia says that last night 2 Ukrainian UAVs got very close to the Kremlin and wanted to attack the Kremlin and naturally try and assassinate President Vladimir Putin. Now, Ukraine does not say so. Ukraine denies it. But if Russia is saying it, Russia has also said that they will take action. Now, what kind of action is possible? First of all, there could be similar attacks. There could be attacks on, let's say, the presidential palace in Kyiv. There could be missile attacks on big cities in the Ukraine, whether it's Kharkov, whether it's Kyiv, or wherever. Thirdly, there could be a spoiling attack. We all know that Ukrainian counteroffensive is going to begin very shortly. That could happen, but the Russians could start a spoiling attack very soon. So all these things are possible. So are other options. So we will have to see what the Russians do. But the Russians have put this out, and they are clearly very serious. They are saying that this was an assassination attempt, that the Ukrainians sent UAVs all the way to Moscow, which is a really long distance from where Ukraine is, to try and attack the Kremlin. It's a big moment, and we will have to see what Russia does and what Ukraine does.
See, if Kyiv had the capacity to launch drone attacks on Moscow, it would have done it much earlier, because for the last 1 year they've been harassed like hell by Russian fire and Russian attacks. Quite clearly, it is the supporters and sponsors of Kyiv in the Western world that are giving Kyiv the additional armaments necessary to try and make such an attempt. But there are 2-3 things that stand out. One is drone attacks are unlikely to be very accurate because by their very nature, drones work on a system where if they are used in situations like this, they have to do a certain amount of guesswork. Mr. Putin, being an autocrat and a dictator, is obviously conscious of the fact that his life would have been threatened, not now, but for the last 1 year. Also, the fact that Kremlin is always averse to the possibility of somebody within internally in Russia trying to unsettle Mr. Putin and get him out of the way, because the West has seen Putin as the biggest hindrance to their attempts to get the better of Russia. The second thing is Russia has fantastic air defense systems. China has bought it. India has bought their air defense systems. So it's unlikely a few odd drones can do more than just psychological damage. And the third is that there will be allegations and counter-allegations, but this could set the stage for a further escalation in the conflict, with Russia pointing fingers at the West, and the West obviously taking the deniable rule, because that's what the route most covert operations take. So all that put together, it is a jigsaw right now, and I don't see any major advantages the West would have got out of trying to make an attempt to threaten or assassinate Putin. Putin lives in a very fortified situation. He is conscious of the fact that he is not very popular in his own country and abroad. And Putin has been responsible for a lot of assassination attempts himself all over the West, through poisoning and other things. So he knows the game. And I don't think we can expect anything major to come out of this except the possibility of escalation.
Moving on to Serbia, tragic scenes at a primary school in Serbian capital Belgrade after a 7th class student opened fire inside the school, killing 9 people, including children and a guard in the mass shooting. Now, 6 more children and a teacher were injured and hospitalized. The 14-year-old boy has been identified and taken into custody.
Right. Let's slip into a very, very short break. More